Well, I want to welcome you to There's Always a Way podcast. And we have the privilege today, and I mean privilege, to have Ambassador Sam Brownback with us. And if you know anything about religious liberty, if you know anything about the persecution of the oppressed, if you know anything about the issues that I believe, and many of us believe, grieve the heart of the Lord and grieve all people of faith and conscience, is to hear how so many of our brothers and sisters are treated around the world. And the ambassador, let me just share a little bit of his background with you. First of all, prior to public service, most of those that we see doing amazing things had a real life before they ever went to Washington, D.C. Prior to his public service, a private attorney in Kansas. We won't get him started on Kansas or Kansas State or on the Kansas City Chiefs because he's asked us not to. But no, but I want you to know he taught agricultural law at Kansas State University. He's co-authored a couple of books on the same subject. But and then all of a sudden he interrupted a pretty full life by simply he went to the U.S. House of Representatives from 95 to 96 from Kansas, and in 96 was elected U.S. Senator from Kansas and was there till 2011. He was the key sponsor of the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, and then he was a U.S. Senator until 2011, and he assumed or was sworn in to be Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. What a title and what a mouthful. And I know there's a lot to explain there, on February 1st, 2018. So, Ambassador, I don't know what goes on in Kansas. There's a lot of amazing individuals that have come out of Kansas that have done amazing things for our country and amazing things for the Lord. And I know y'all are kind of like a pack out there. I mean, man, y'all have each other's back. I know how much confidence those in the administration have in you, and I know how much confidence pastors and missionaries around the world have in you. So I just want to thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Jay. It's an honor to be on your podcast. It's an honor to see you. You and I share some similar relationships with various people, particularly a guy like Doug Coe that did so much of the National Prayer Breakfast, and who was started by Dwight Eisenhower, a fellow Kansan, and Frank Carlson, who was in the U.S. Senate from Kansas at that time. And that's had such an impact around the world. I still talk with people, and when I travel to countries, I'll often one of my first base touches are people that are associated with the National Prayer Breakfast movement. Wow. So it's an amazing relationship network, and it's great to know you, and it's great to be with you on this podcast.
Well, thank you, sir. And thank you for bringing up Doug. I'm going to devote an entire podcast to him because I want to make sure folks remember the influence and the legacy of Doug Coe. And he was always behind the scene, which is kind of interesting. Yeah. I mean, for somebody to have done, his fingerprints are all over so many things for, almost 50 years, or over 50 years, I guess. It's just amazing to me. It reminds us that you don't have to put yourself first. You know, you can put others first, yes. Put the Lord first, and you'll have an unbelievable life. So, Ambassador, you're involved with him. I mean, I've been privileged to know a little bit about how hard you've worked on some of the recent hostages that have been released, and how hard you care about issues, humanitarian issues, as well as serious things that affect people of faith all over the world. So with your background, your education, you've been an attorney, you've been a House of Representatives, you've been a senator, you've been a governor, and we're finding out, by the way, I just say for our listeners, the role of governors is a lot more complex. And I mean, I think we've all learned through the virus and some of the other challenges we're going through that may be one of the toughest assignments out there. But with your background, and of course now your relationship in D.C., what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the phrase, "There's always a way"?
That's true. It's the first thing that comes to my mind. There's even a pretty good Bible verse on that the Lord will always provide a way of escape or a way of action. And then I also find it true for my own life. I've been in a number of really difficult situations, politically, policy-wise, and at times where you look at it and just go, I don't see any way out of this. I don't see how we make it through. And then something just kind of almost seems like it falls out of heaven, where you look at it and go, well, that'll work, and off you go. But I think it's a real testament to trust that God is sovereign, that He does provide, and that He doesn't, leave His people alone, just out there hanging, and that faith is a key important component of it. I often think that God provides us these sort of problems just so we have to look at Him and just say, I don't know how we're going to do this. My favorite quote on this is Abraham Lincoln, who would say that he'd often fall into his knees seeking wisdom because he couldn't see any other way. There was no other way but on my knees and asking the Lord. The first thing that comes to my mind when you say that phrase is it's true.
Wow. What a great word. Thank you for that. I'll just share with you that back when there was a certain candidate for president in New York City that was, in my mind, probably the most unlikely guy to be president, or certainly be somebody that'd be a champion for evangelicals or just people of faith. But I never will forget the very first meeting that Doug had a lot to do with me being sitting in that room with about 4 people, and just simply was asked the questions: what do people look for? What do people of faith look for in somebody they might consider to be their candidate or to be their president? And the only answer that the Lord put on my mind was, I said, well, sir, we're not looking for a priest. We're not looking for a Sunday school teacher. We're not looking for a pope. I tell you what we are looking for. And I guess the best way to describe it is that picture of George Washington on his knees in the snow at Valley Forge.
Yeah.
And he said, Mr. Trump said, I know that picture. I get goosebumps just thinking about that picture. I remember that picture. And I said, well, sir, that, as you know, that wasn't a Polaroid. That wasn't, a pose scene. That was based on hundreds of letters that soldiers had written back to their families about waking up and seeing that, General Washington was not there. And then he'd be out in the woods on his knees praying. And there were hundreds of letters. I mean, that was his character. And I said, sir, I said, I can't speak for my own denomination. I'm Baptist, and I'd never want to try to speak for that group. And evangelicals, we have a lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions. But I said, I do believe that all of us are looking for somebody that's man enough to get on their knees. I said, you're a tall man, You're a big guy, but you never stand taller than when you're on your knees praying. And I said, he was praying for bullets and boots, and they hadn't been paid in months, and paying for food. I mean, so I said, there'll be times, whoever's president, you pinch yourself. I can't believe I get to be president. But there are going to be other days where the problems or the loss of life or the pressure is such that we just need to know that somebody's going to be on their knees seeking help. And then I referenced Abraham Lincoln, that picture of him slumped over, the quote that you just gave. So for me, that's the great picture of what it takes to be the kind of leader to get us through certainly all the challenges that we have.
I agree. And you can see it throughout the key moments of the U.S. history. And this has been such a blessed land with such an incredible mission around the world that continues today. Even in the work that I'm doing, really, there's no other nation in the world that can lead on this effort like the United States can on religious freedom. But it's a nation that's been forged in great trial. It's a nation that's had a huge number of challenges. It's a nation that a lot of other countries, all the other countries around the world, look to. They may not look up to, although most do, but they will always be looking at what the U.S. is doing. And it's that leadership forged in difficulty that's captured in that picture. I know exactly the picture you're talking about of George Washington. And, I've thought often that was the crucible that the thought and the prayer of the United States was captured in, was Valley Forge. This terrible time, great difficulty, facing the world's strongest superpower at the time with a ragtag army that I don't even have socks for. And we're going to whip these guys? Yeah. And they did. But it was God's providence and faith that carried him on through. And you see that throughout Washington's writings.
Wow. What a great word, and what a great reminder about what a privilege it is to be a citizen in the United States of America, and what it means around the world. And thankfully, and I'm not trying to butter bread here, but I honestly believe, Ambassador, what you're doing and so many are doing today is that we're also sending a message around the world. We're not just known for our movies that, show us to have no morals and unbelievable things, and in music and fashion and all the things that everybody consumes from the United States. But now there's another product out there. We care about what you're going through, and we care about what's happening, especially to sometimes those that have no voice. So I always say the one reason I'm so grateful you're there is you're not afraid to lift up your voice for those that don't have a voice. And so I personally have watched up close what some of the efforts you've made, the trips you've made, pleading for people or stating the case and reminding everybody the United States is watching how you treat these people. Now, Ambassador, for all the students and all of the educators and ministers and youth pastors that are watching and listening, and a lot of parents as well, I want to ask you, what would you say about the calling to be in public service? And is that preacher talk, or is that reality? You're a lawyer, you're a businessman, an agricultural guy. I mean, you're not just a guy sitting in seminary, as important as that is. But was there a special call? I mean, I believe I have a call to the ministry, but I begin to believe there's a calling for public service.
Oh, I absolutely believe that. Matter of fact, when I came in the class of '94, and this was the first, Republican control of the Congress in 50 years, and I was in that class, and that was when Newt Gingrich was the first Speaker of the House, and boy, we were pretty rambunctious. And there was a lot of stuff that that was flying around, but you could go around that room and ask various people, well, how'd you get here? Because a third of us had never held public office before. No public office. And, people would say, well, honestly, I just really felt a call of God. I felt very concerned about what our country's doing. And I ran. And I was a veterinarian. I was a practicing veterinarian. I was an activist. I was this or that. And you'd go around and you would hear people talking about their different callings that they had. I had one friend who had given up on politics altogether. And he had served the state legislature. He was done. He wanted to just go fishing. I'm done with all this stuff. I just want to go fishing. And he had a heart attack. And he's laying there on the gurney and being taken care of, and Lord gives him, said, "I'm not done with you. We're not going fishing. We're going back into the U.S. Senate," and that was his calling, to go into the U.S. Senate. Goodness. So I absolutely believe that these are callings, and indeed, if you don't feel the calling, I really kind of question whether you ought to do it or not, because it's a difficult task with lots of peril.
Oh, my soul! It reminds me of the Roman Colosseum. You know, you don't know who's coming out that next door. Is it an elephant, or is it somebody with 5 spikes in their hands? Well, and speaking of that, you know, one of the great questions we get from so many, especially young people, and a lot of adults that are still wrestling with trying to make sense of everything happening. Can faith and Washington, D.C., can faith and politics work together? You know, that we've been hammered for so long that there's got to be separation. There's got to be separation. And of course, we know that's a gross misquote and misinterpretation of a private letter Jefferson wrote to some preachers. And he's talking about government ought to stay away from things of faith, stay out of things of faith. It's never meant to be that it's forbidden or we shouldn't be involved. But how do you answer that question about faith and politics?
Well, I think everybody brings their values into the public square. Whether you believe you're a person of faith or not, you bring your set of values into the public square. And we saw in the founders, the original writers of the Constitution, the founding fathers, many of them had seminary degrees. They were people of faith. They were active people. They were believers. They were knowledgeable about their faith. And they sought to put that into practice in this country in an amazing time, in an amazing way. I mean, you consider, you know, you're looking at going on 250 years ago almost now, that they write these documents. And this was a totally unthought of idea where people could govern themselves. No, you got to have a king. So you got to have royalty people can't govern themselves. And they said, you know, you could, but you have to have an internal governance on you. You have to have a faith orientation. So it's basically you governing yourself within a maximum set of freedoms. And I think it was really designed along the way of how God gives us freedom. We can choose to do whatever we want to do. We can follow him or we can deny him. But we have that freedom. And I think just this notion of freedom and liberty is so basic to the human need and experience to flourish. But that freedom can take you, I can go and do whatever I'd like, and it can be good or it could be ill. That the internal governance is that it would go towards the good and for the betterment of others. So I believe these interact very closely with each other. I remember trying at first when I was in Congress saying, you know, politics isn't beanbag. I'm going to have to leave my faith at the door and I'm going to have to play this game the earthly way. And I wasn't a very happy camper for very long that way. When you try to separate your who you are from the job you're doing. And I just, no, I'm gonna bring my set of values like everybody else does into the public square, and it's the right way, and the country profits by that. Remember, our motto remains, "In God we trust." We think a lot about God's provision for us as a nation, as we should.
Well, one thing that, again, one of the things I admire about how you steer that particular office, if you'll let me use that term, where you are, is that some people think that people of faith are going to get there and then try to impose their religion and their faith on everyone else. And yet here you are every day fighting for religions and minorities, and it may be 50 of a religion some of us may not have ever even heard of before. But we're fighting just as hard for them as we are for our own religious liberty. So I'm amazed that sometimes people think that people of faith are going to DC and they're trying to impose no, they're just trying to follow through on everything they know to be true and good and righteous and a benefit to all.
Absolutely. And God doesn't impose his faith on us. He didn't make you a robot and say, okay, Jay, you've got to follow me. That was a free decision on your part. And
well said.
then so I have people say to me that religious freedom is really kind of God's freedom to man. And no government has the right to interfere with that, no matter what choice you make with it, whether it's any faith or no faith at all. Or you may decide that you want to be an atheist or an agnostic, or you want to be a Baha'i or a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Christian, whatever the case might be. But that's your inherent right as a dignified human being. And countries then flourish when they allow that to take place. And they protect people's rights to make dignified choices of their own soul. This is why, and it's such a foundational freedom, because we look and we see that countries that get this freedom right, then they're generally much better on other freedoms too, on freedom of speech, on freedom of assembly, on freedom of press. It's really one of those, you and I both like football. This is kind of the basic blocking and tackling piece of kind of running an organized society. You get this one wrong, you're not going to be doing anything else. You got to get this one right.
Wow. What is meant? What's the best definition you use for religious freedom? What does that mean?
It's the right of the individual to do with their own soul as they see fit. That's what I use. It's your choice. And no government has the right to interfere with that choice that you make as an individual, as long as you're peaceful about it. Now, if you're going to go out and commit a terrorist act because of some calling, well, that's another matter. You're not being peaceful about it. But if you peacefully choose to make whatever choice with your own soul, that's your religious freedom.
No question. What would you say to individuals? And I know you're asked this question a lot in different ways, but this is especially for students. And this answer will also be helpful to parents and educators that are trying to help their own children, as well as youth groups and classrooms, etc. But there's a lot of criticism in the world today, and a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos. And so what advice do you have for young people? If you and I can put ourselves in the DeLorean and go back in time, right? But knowing what we know, what we've seen, having lived a while, what do we say to students that are looking around and seeing all the chaos and the volume and the noise? I love Central Command. It has a great phrase. There's a lot of noise in the system, implying there's some chatter, there's some things going on we've got to be concerned about. Well, there's a lot of noise in the system today. So what do we say to those? What advice would we have for those that are trying to navigate in the confusion and the noise and the chaos and the criticisms out there?
Not to get discouraged, not to grow weary, to stay engaged, not to pull out. I think are key things, because there is a lot of reason, I think, for people to just kind of throw in the towel and give up and just say, I'm just going to go, sit in my house somewhere and not be engaged. I think that's the big thing that I would ask people not to do. And it can be very discouraging. You watch the news very long anymore, and it can really get you down. So a lot of times I don't pay attention to too much of it. Not that it's not accurate, or not that there may be biases in it, which I think there are. But that more, it gets in your head, and you start thinking like, well, there is just no hope. It's all going downhill, and there's no way of stopping it. And that's just not true. The thing about America is that this is a very dynamic, noisy nation, and it was always designed to be that way. Everybody was supposed to be able to have a voice. They were supposed to be able to bring it into the public square. There was supposed to be robust discussion. I wish it would be more civil, but there was always designed that this would be a noisy democracy, and out of this would come some valuable movement forward of the nation. And it was always meant to move slowly as well. The process itself to move and to change things was always designed to be one that would be very slow to allow people to adjust to things and systems to adjust. So
Wow.
Don't be disappointed with the speed, and don't be disappointed with the noise. That's part of the system, but just keep focused and keep your values really front and center and moving them forward.
Wow. What a clear word. My wife and I recently, because of all of our time of being self-contained and all the other things that we've all gone through, we've watched more television, but than we have in our lives. But we've also gotten to where we can't take the 24/7 nonstop bombardment, like you said. So we've looked for different series that are able to fit for consumption, if you know what I mean by that. But there was the John Adams series from some years ago, based on the best-selling book about John Adams, first vice president and then the second president, but his fingerprints are all over the Constitution and Declaration and in our early years. But watching that series, I don't know if you've seen it recently or not, but
No.
man, there was yellow fever and smallpox epidemics. I mean, they were in essence not pandemics around the world, but they were epidemics in our country. They were just, he moved from several cities to try to escape yellow fever. And his wife had their children inoculated in a very early, dangerous, consideredly measured radical treatment to protect their children by getting them vaccinated from the pox. So we know that pandemics was something that we went through in our early years. And then to listen to all of the noise, I mean the unbelievable conflict of ideas. And it went through, it was in the White House, and it was in the two parties. And, all of a sudden we just kind of got I always think I got my head in the game, but I've gone, this stuff's been going on this same way for a long, long time. But I don't know what it was about that miniseries, but I got to see it. And it kind of made me just take a breath and go, we can get through this.
And we can. And we have seen this before. But I think the key thing is that you try to keep your head clear, keep focused on what you know is true and right, and keep pushing towards that. Lincoln, again, to go back to him and to quote him, he would say, I didn't read the newspapers a lot because I know what's going on. I don't need to have somebody else interpret it for me, or more still, get in my head about, I'm criticizing Lincoln. He's doing a terrible job handling the war. We've got too many deaths. There's this or that. Lincoln knows these things. But I don't need to hear somebody else's opinion about this fact. We've got experts around us, and let's pull those in. But it's a big part of really keeping yourself stable and moving forward and not discouraged. What I think is the big problem of the season is people getting discouraged and depressed about there's just no hope. Well, there is hope. There is a way. God always provides a way forward. We can do this. We can make it through these things. We are the lead nation in the world. And to keep your knowing those parameters and those ways forward, because it just, otherwise I think people can really get despaired and just give up. And that's the thing, or give in to fear. Which fear is very contagious, and as a mean governor, if you're governed by fear, that's you're not making decisions anymore. You're being run by fear.
Well, God's not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So I keep claiming that verse. The two more questions. Thank you so much for your time. I heard in one of your speeches that 80% of people live in places where religious freedom is under attack.
That's correct. That there's some level of restriction on their religious freedom. In some cases, it's huge, and there's a death penalty associated with not going along with the majority faith. In other places, they're much more modest and minor, and in other places, still, you're finding this penetration of technology and the intelligence systems to controlling people, where you've got cameras and artificial intelligence and facial recognition, to where people are allowed to do kind of anything they want except participate in their religion. And we're starting to see those systems penetrate more and more, which is the big part of what I'm really concerned about, Jay, because the technology is all there to do that. And we think the oppression of the future is going to look much more like what you're seeing in Western China now, where you've got these high-tech systems that allow you to do anything in the society kind of you want, except practice your faith. And if you're willing to walk away from your faith, you can live a very nice life, and we'll leave you all alone. You want to participate in your religion, then you're going to be excluded from being able to buy and sell. You're going to not be able to travel certain places. You're going to be substantial limitations put on you. And anybody that contacts you will have the same limitations put on them. So you're going to be isolated, or you're going to be pressured by your own peer group to not participate in your faith. So these sorts of new systems of oppression are ones that really have me concerned, because they're pretty inexpensive once you get the information loaded into the system. These are not hard systems to operate, and they're not expensive systems.
Well, we're so grateful. We encourage our students to wear a bracelet that says "One with Them," and it looks like barbed wire. And we're trying to give our students several ways to be involved, in our student leadership university programs. Give them a way to be involved, to pray for those that are losing their freedom, to know them by name, and to right now as a teenager begin to support those causes that make a tremendous difference. Last question to a man that I already know the answer. Are you an optimist or a pessimist with everything going forward? Knowing what you know, because you know what we don't know. One time I want to do a program where I just ask you, what are the 3 things that keep you up at night? But I didn't want to do that to you your first day. You know things that we don't know. But what are you, an optimist? And I say, this is your closing word. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Is knowing what you know about what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I'm a complete optimist. I think they're tough times. I don't have any doubt about that. But often we've got problems. There's always problems that are going on. And a lot of times when you see all this difficulty and churning, what's happening really is the problem is being surfaced. It's kind of like the dross from silver. It's got to be heated up enough that you can get it to the surface to take it off. And that's what I believe is happening, honestly, is that you've got all this stewing and heat and problem. But what it does is it surfaces problems. We have racial issues in the United States. We've got problems with religious freedom. We've got a pandemic that's going on. And the beauty about a country like the United States is it often will take us a long time to focus on the problem. But once we get focused on it, we can handle and we can change and we can address a problem. And it's just for us a matter of getting focused, because we got 1,000 different things pulling us different directions. So I'm optimistic we're going to be addressing these problems. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be I don't want to say unpredictable, but erratic, up and down. But we have the capacity to do this, and I believe that's what's happening, and that's what will happen. And to me, that's an exciting prospect. We're going to deal with problems we have. They're not going to be staying hidden. They're coming up.
Yeah.
Let's deal with it. And then we can prosper towards a more perfect union, and we can move forward to Dr. King's beloved community that he had given that prophetic vision for us.
Well, and he was quite a gift to our country, no question about it. Well, I spend my life trying to encourage people to feel your muscle, not your pulse. And sometimes I feel my pulse. I'm so tired. I go, man, I'm dead. I'm not even alive. And there's other times that my pulse is racing out of control. So if I can always remember, feel my muscle, not my pulse, I can usually handle most of these things. Ambassador, thank you. I mean that. I pray for you. I just respect you, and I'm very grateful for what all you're doing. And thank you for your help. You've been a great counselor to me on some issues. We got some things going on right now. Sometime I'd like to I'll send you a one-pager on it just to let you know what we're doing out here. But there's a lot of things going on in the world, and you know that better than anybody.
Well, thanks, Jay. God bless you and your group, and appreciate you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.